So this is going to be a little weird, because I'm going to talk to you about leadership, and I'm going to talk to you about creativity, and I'm a technology guy. Or I should say I'm a recovering technology guy, because there is a story behind this. I became interested in organizational behavior for two reasons. One day, my boss said to me, "Johnathan, if it wasn't for people, this technology thing would be easy." There is some truth to that. And second, I wrote a series of articles for Network Computing magazine called On Location, where we highlighted innovation and excellence in technology organizations. And so, you'd go on site and you try to figure out what technology is it that these folks are using that's making them so great. Well, guess what? It was never the technology. It was always about the people, and it was always about the leadership. And so I got really interested in organizational behavior, and I spent the next part of my career working to turn around organizations and help guide them into making their technology programs actually helpful for the larger organization. So I'm a troubleshooter, and when you troubleshoot anything, the basics are you've got to look at what has changed, right? And frankly, with organizations, the world has changed. And when I think about how the world has changed, I like to think about the movie How Green Was My Valley. And there's a social contract there, right? It's a very simple social contract, and we'll kind of bounce off what today's social contract is. But the social contract in that movie is the bosses own the coal mine, and they took enormous financial risk in establishing that coal mine, because if it fails, they lose their fortunes. Meanwhile, all the workers, they get to make slightly more money than they would in the agrarian society. And in return for that, and I suspect they didn't know this, they became the first corporate wage slaves. So not so great. But fortunately, the world has changed. And it's changed in three ways. The first way that it's changed is, of course, technology. And when you and I don't like our job or we get treated badly, we have options. We've got social networking, we've got LinkedIn, we've got the ability to telecommute and do a job. These folks did not have that ability. If you left the coal mine, you might have to leave home, which was frequently a pretty sobering move, and it was pretty final, and it was very sad. The second way the world's changed is complexity of work. We have a lot of automation now, so that opens the door to do work that automation can't do, like put together computers and distribute them to folks who need them in the community. Well, if you start treating a programmer or a network engineer the same way you might micromanage the snot out of a coal miner, I got news for you. IT people do evil things when your back is turned, okay? And you might not like the outcome. So the third way that the world has changed is perhaps not as obvious. And it's about portfolio diversification. It used to be that the owners of an enterprise took enormous personal risk. Well, enter the miracle of portfolio diversification, which when you have more holdings, you take less overall risk. And so instead of having one coal mine, you might have 20, 30. In our society, one person does not own, typically, a very, very risky enterprise. And this is where the social contract gets interesting, because all of a sudden, the balance of power has totally shifted. You've got in some cases, if you've got a startup, or if you're working for a large organization, and they've done something like they've cut benefits for employees who've been there 30 years, doesn't it seem to you that the employees are the ones shouldering the greatest risk? And of course, in some cases, they are. And that means that they really do deserve the greater reward. You know, a lot of people fear their employer. But to rip off a line from one of my favorite movies, it is not, in our world, it is not the employee who should fear the employer. It is the employer who should fear the employee. And I'll tell you why. You've got the absolute family jewels as an innovator. As an employee who answers questions like, how are we going to find creative ways to cut the budget? What are we going to do about new product development? In the backdrop of a world where there's globalization, where competition is absolutely out of control. You do one thing, and it's outsourced over here, and it's manufactured over there. Your employees are your innovation engine. And innovation is absolutely necessary for organizations to survive today. So what do? Because although you have employees that you need to innovate, a lot of organizations that I've visited with seem to have the policy of beatings will continue until morale improves. And it just doesn't work. Well, organizations are very, very bad at learning, right? Which is why some of them use a 150-year-old social contract. But it can be done. Organizations can turn it around, and they can start treating their innovators the way their innovators need to be treated. And it's good for everybody. Here are five ways that I've picked up that organizations can start to turn it around. Number one, you've got to make quality of life for employees one of your keystone, cornerstone, core values. And when I got to the city of Asheville, customer service for IT was abysmal. And the employees knew it. And they didn't like it. And so we talked about, how are we going to change this? How are we going to turn this thing around? And you typically talk about things like, we've got to focus on customer service, we've got to prioritize, all that kind of stuff. But the employees at this particular organization had this great idea. They said, we need to recognize that there is a direct relationship between an employee's quality of life and the quality of work that they can do. Well, it's 5 years later. Customer service is now in the 90% good or excellent customer service perception. And in the past 3 years, these employees have won 3 innovation awards on a statewide, nationwide, and international basis. And if you don't believe me, don't take my word for it. In this month's Harvard Business Review, there's a story about a CEO who tripled revenue and doubled market capitalization by putting employees first. Not customers, employees. You've got to water, feed, and prune. We talked a lot about organics earlier today, right? You can't have an industrial approach to education. Well, the workplace has got to not have an industrial approach to people. It's an analog thing. It is not classical music. It is jazz. And maybe you can't get to the power of human touch in the workplace without getting in trouble, but you certainly can. You certainly can provide coaching, mentoring, empathy, professional development, and yeah, sometimes you have to remove folks from the organization because it's not working. But I can tell you this: it needs to be done, and if you do it in a humane type of way and you're not brutal about it. And too often people think they either have to do nothing or they have to hit someone over the head with a club. If you do it in a humane way, my experience is, and frankly, I treasure this. I've spoken to employees and we've decided to part ways. I later got a note saying, best thing that ever happened to me. So it can be done. Pain sucks, whether you're home or in the workplace. And organizations that value employees based upon the number of extra hours that they're in the office and away from their families and not working out and not taking care of their work-life balance, that is insane. That is like having a machine where you say, look what a great machine this is because I run it all the time. That's a good way to make the machine break. And people are no different. You've got to allow employees to have fun. And I would never have put this in this list, except because I wouldn't have believed that people don't understand this. But when I arrived to one role, I had a couple of employees say to me during sort of the assessment process, hey, Johnathan, I noticed you laugh a lot, which I do. It's okay to laugh? Well, yeah, it's okay to laugh. Is this a test? Well, it turns out the previous management had sort of slammed a hand down on the conference table during a meeting and said, there's too much laughing around here. Okay, I want to work there, don't I? So, I don't have to tell you folks that creativity, innovation, and fun, it's peanut butter and jelly. Why would you try to squash that? And finally, you have to measure to be credible, right? You've got to have a budget. You've got to take measurements. How well are we doing? That's the heart rate and blood pressure and respirations of the business world. You got to know how much are we selling, how are we serving customers, that kind of thing. But organizations use them in insane ways. We did a research study with Information Week magazine, and the top orange circle is we correlated an organization's performance against how they use performance metrics. And so when we looked at organizations that use performance metrics for continuous improvement and strategy and that kind of thing, those folks had double the excellent performance of that lower ring, which is folks who reward and punish individual staff based on those performance metrics. Well, that's pretty obvious too. If there's a metric and you're either going to get a raise out of it or you're going to get punished, you're going to manipulate it however you like, and to heck with the company. And so what I'll leave you with is we all have a choice in what kind of work environment we create for our employees. We're there 5 out of 7 days a week. And you've got a stake in it. You don't want to live in a toxic environment. Neither do they. Thanks so much.